I discourage any discussion of impeachment. On a political side, I think it's a gift to the Republicans to talk about impeachment.
The last thing this country needs is impeachment proceedings that move forward as a matter of course because we don't like the president.
You can't jump the gun and determine that somebody should be impeached when you're going to be voting on the impeachment issue. It is too early to talk about impeachment.
Oh, they're all lying. The entire Democratic Party base wants the president impeached. John Nichols writes for the Nation, has wrote a piece asking why are so many Democrats afraid of impeachment. John Nichols joins us tonight. John, I don't think I agree with you on much. Normally I'd be here arguing with you, but I'm just going to give you a sincere compliment. I thought your piece was honest. This is the constitutionally prescribed remedy for a president you think has gone off the rails. I don't believe that. You do, but impeachment is the answer. Democrats support it. Why are the leaders of the Democratic Party not willing to admit that?
I think they're playing a political game. And I think that you assume that they would impeach if they got power. I'm not sure of that. Huh. I think that there is a tepidness about using impeachment as a live instrument of the Constitution, holding a president who has, as you suggest, gone off the rails, who I would suggest abuses the office, to account. And but clearly, at this point, there's a tremendous pressure on members of the party and on folks to not talk about impeachment. My sense is that's very problematic, because if you are saying that the President of the United States has abused his office, if you are suggesting that he's doing things that are clearly impeachable, but then you say, well, but let's not talk about impeachment, that creates an unreality to the discourse. And I think, frankly, it's not appropriate. I think that A, a discussion of impeachment is healthy. I think it's necessary. But B, it's also something that I think politicians of both parties tend to fear too much.
Well, but it's above, what I like about it, and again, I'm not for it, but it's above board. It takes place in public. Yeah. And people can make their public arguments. And what they're doing instead is subverting entire federal agencies, and liberals should be worried about this, law enforcement and intel agencies, to do their bidding. Why do that? If you have a case, be a man about it, say what it is, voters can assess it. That's what impeachment is. That's why the founders put it in the founding documents. So why would the leaders of the party pretend, oh, that's off the table? It just seems so feline and dishonest.
Again, I'm not sure they're pretending, Tucker. We will see if Democrats get control of the House, whether they would move on it. But remember that back in the George W. Bush presidency, there was a significant agitation at the grassroots of the Democratic Party, and frankly beyond it, among a lot of folks, for impeachment of President Bush. Nancy Pelosi came to power. I know you do, because you actually followed it. And Nancy Pelosi came to power in 2007, and one of her first signals was off the table. And so this is a complexity on this issue. Now, where it goes back to, I think you and I both know, is the Clinton impeachment. And there's a sense that the Clinton impeachment led to political repercussions for Republicans. In fact, if you look at it, the repercussions were not as great as some people assume. But I always remind folks that if you look at the Nixon impeachment, which obviously wasn't brought to fruition, but was a very serious moment, there weren't political repercussions for the Democrats in that. And so I do think that we have a lot of politicians on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, who avoid accountability moments and frankly, avoid opening up the discussions when they should be doing so.
Exactly. They're avoiding accountability. And I have to say, again, I don't think I agree with you on anything, including what to order for dinner. But I appreciate the honesty of the actual left in this case, trying to hold your party, not mine, yours, to some account and to honesty. So thank you, John, for doing that. Well, not a backhanded compliment, a sincere one. Thanks.
I appreciate it, Tucker, and I'm sure I won't get any pats on the back for it. But
no, you definitely won't.
Okay.
Britt Hume joins us next for more on FBI spying and the latest twists and turns in the endless hunt for Russian collusion. Maybe he has evidence. We'll ask him next.
Well, first, Tucker, don't confuse evidence with a conclusion. Evidence gives the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Look, I've been doing this for a year. Look, I watch Rachel Maddow. I get it. I know there are a lot of Russians and Russian people and emails, but like, where's the actual proof that something happened after more than a year of this?
Well, I'm not the prosecutor. I don't have subpoena power. Bob Mueller does. All I'm saying is
you do have a high-level security clearance, and you're on the Intel Committee, so presumably you'd have more than like a clip of him at a
I'm only
press
giving you the
conference.
evidence that I've seen in an unclassified manner.
But there must be more classified that you're not allowed to see. We had a lively engagement with Congressman Eric Swalwell of California last night. We offered a half hour in order to see proof of Russian collusion, and there wasn't any. Meanwhile, today on The View, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, the one who lied to Congress on camera, said that President Trump wasn't being spied on by the Obama administration. They were just watching him, and Trump ought to thank them for that.
Was the FBI spying on Trump's campaign?
No, they were not. They were spying on a term I don't particularly like, but on what the Russians were doing, trying to understand, were the Russians infiltrating, trying to gain access, trying to gain leverage and influence.
So why doesn't
which
he
is
like
what they do.
So why doesn't he like that? He should be happy that
Well,
we're
he should
doing.
be.
Yeah, he should be grateful, that ingrate. We're joined now by Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume. Britt, why isn't the president more grateful that the Obama FBI was spying on him for his own good?
It's interesting to hear Clapper use the word spying, because a number of the administration's defenders, the Obama administration's defenders in the media and elsewhere, have been very, very careful about using that word and saying that it really wasn't spying that was going on. It was an informant. But mind you, of course, this was at that stage, this was a counterintelligence investigation, which is to say that they were acting, the FBI was acting in its capacity as a spy agency when they sent this guy in to see what was, to see what he could find about what was going on inside the Trump campaign with regard to the Russians. So pretty hard to argue they weren't spying on him.
When do we become so blasé about it? I mean, you covered Watergate, and one of the gravest crimes that President Nixon was accused of committing was subverting federal agencies to gather intelligence on his political opponents. That's what people said he did, use the IRS, people said. People were outraged by that. Journalists were outraged by that. Why aren't they outraged now?
Well, because they rather like the Obama administration, and they cannot stand the ground Donald Trump walks on. That's really what this is about, the antipathy to him, and the sense in the media and elsewhere that his election constituted a national emergency, which all efforts should have been made to prevent, which nobody thought was going to happen, and when it did, everybody's heads exploded, and this is where we are.
But wait, doesn't democracy die in darkness?
Well, of course, but there is this. The efforts of Russia to meddle in the election are worth investigating. There's no question about that. But if you are beginning to insert yourselves into somebody's campaign and you're worried about protecting the campaign, as some apologists for the FBI have stated, what would you do? Wouldn't you then go immediately and say to the people in that campaign, look, we need to tell you this. This is you got a problem here. You got the Russians trying to penetrate you here. That was considered, we now know, and it never happened.
Which is the most telling, and thank you for reminding us of that, the most telling detail. I agree completely. Britt Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Always. Glenn Greenwald is co-founder and editor at The Intercept, and he joins us tonight. You're not a Trump supporter. I don't think this is about Trump. I think it's about oversight of our intel and law enforcement agencies. What do you think of the coverage, which you've been following closely, of this alleged mole in the campaign?
It's incredibly bizarre, Tucker, because for the last 2 weeks, all we heard from the FBI, and of course the media reported it uncritically, was that it was extremely dangerous to try and expose or determine the identity of this informant, because to do so would be to jeopardize his life, the life of other people, national security, all the things they always say when they want to hide from the public what it is that they do. And now that the New York Times and the Washington Post published huge amounts of details about this informant, making it incredibly easy to know that it was Stephen Halper, because the Daily Caller 2 days earlier had reported all the same details and named him. We all now know who the informant is, and we know that that was just a fairy tale, that he's not some covert undercover agent, but somebody who's a well-known CIA operative whose name has been repeatedly published in newspapers as a CIA operative and as a Republican operative for decades. And so the whole claim that the media was circulating on behalf of the FBI that this was some sensitive covert asset turned out to be a lie, and the New York Times and Washington Post knew that, which is why they did everything but name him by publishing all of the details to let us know who it is.
But it wasn't just the media. I mean, you saw Mark Warner of Virginia, who's on the Senate Intel Committee, who's seen as a pretty sober person, basically threaten his colleagues with criminal prosecution if they in any way divulge the identity. What would be the justification for that?
This is what The intelligence community does, Tucker, and I've been trying to essentially make this point for 18 months now, as we've been told we're required patriotically to accept whatever it is that they say. I spent 3 years reporting on the NSA. They constantly said that it would be a crime if we divulged this information, that it would endanger people. As we reported on it, nobody was ever hurt. They were trying to cover themselves and their own wrongdoing and not the national security of the country. And that's the same here. You have people like Mark Warner and inside of the FBI and Justice Department who don't want us to know the name of the informant, not because they're worried about national security, but because they're worried about themselves. And that's why they're using the language they always use. You're going to be engaged in espionage. You're going to be jeopardizing lives. This is what they always say. And the reason why I think the media deserves criticism is because the media knows better than anybody that when they say that, they're in the vast majority of cases lying and trying to cover for themselves. And that's why it's so important that we keep digging.
I remember your NSA reporting well, and I apologize to you for not taking it more seriously at the time. You were right. And anyway, I'm grateful that you're doing it, and thank you for being one of the last remaining civil libertarians. Glenn Greenwald, I appreciate it.